My name is Björn Sigurdsson. I work at the city of Uppsala, and cities is very much a hot topic today. But it has not always been like that. 10 years ago, I worked to COP11 in Montreal, and then last year I worked to COP21 in Paris, and there's a huge change. And partly, I think the change is one major success factor, or one factor, the success factor behind the Paris Agreement in general, and that is that the UN system changed tactics from being a very technical and judicial endeavor, long text. Instead, they started to mobilize and put forward those who did something. Cities, municipalities, companies, and organizations. And it's called the Lima Paris Action Agenda, this mobilization. And it also divided into different themes, where different stakeholders could join together on different, like agriculture, forest, the building sector, where you focus on the indirect climate effects and so on. And actually the international arena organized and is organizing the world and the actors, the stakeholders in the world, to focus on what are the solutions, and let's work together. And we have a role cross-sectional and also together on different levels. And in the assessment report from the IPCC in 2014, the cities for the first time ever mentioned in the system. We often talk about cities, and it will be a huge challenge because we have, over 3,000 years, we have built cities for 3 billion people. And in the next 30 years, we'll need to build the same amount of city space for the same amount of people, 6 million people. But still, when 6 billion people are living in cities in the future, there will be 3 billion people living in the countryside. And we need to work together, see the interplay between them. I was cold in Montreal, so you got a little hat and a scarf when you came to. In Paris, you got a bomb shelter kind of thing. Cities are, well, the basic unit in the world organization. It's the democratic base. And we do have a role to gather and push and network and advise and get some energy into the local sustainable development. And this is what I think is the role of the city, is to make it easier for each one of us to work and live more eco-friendly. And we need to do this together because the city can, often we have a kind of good grasp of what is needed to be done. What is the target, the end target? And we can do our part. We can, for example, build bicycle lanes. But then we need me and all of you then to get out of the car seat and hop on the bicycle saddle and use the bike lanes that the city has built. So it's always working together. And here is some example of what we do, and that's a different lecture what we do on the ground. Biogas production, building a more attractive city where people can live and walk, and the central station, huge investment. We have, if you look for Solkartan on the internet, you will find that we have provided you with a map so that you can check out your roof, or your company's roof, how much solar energy could you produce on this roof. And it's not compulsory for a city or municipality to work with climate change is used, but we do, because we work with things that are important. And we have for a long time, as cities, formulated targets that was way sharper than the nation's climate change target. Now the nation is shaping up, and we are getting more in line, and this of course gives a big helping hand to each other. In Uppsala we calculate and take into consideration the emissions from the local energy use, from local transportation, but also from the farming and animals and so on that we have. And we do something that only we in Gothenburg do. We take also into account long distance travel. Airplane, you go outside the boundaries of Uppsala. And last week I worked to and in the Miljömålsberedning you have excluded long distance traveling from your considerations. Chalmers has now made a calculation and a method for Sweden to calculate the emissions from Swedish people's traveling by air internationally. And if we don't do anything, the emissions from our trips to Thailand and to Barcelona will exceed the national kind of Kyoto emissions when we are hitting our target. So if we can, I think the nation can. Some years ago, Vattenfall and Volvo made an experiment. They put one family half year, can you go down from 7 tons per capita to 1 ton? And they more or less made it. We did last year, together with ICA and Uppsala Hem here, we made something similar, but now we were a little bit modernized, so we had 30 families, persons from this house you see on picture, and we had a little app, and you could get feedback how well you were doing in your efforts to lower your climate footprint. And the question is, what is the next step, logical step in this development? I think that for my own conclusion, which is my conclusion, is that I think to get hold of the consumer perspective, I think we can work with 2 different targets. We can have one target for the territorial, and we can have one consumer target, and then juggle with both 2. And the question that we don't have enough good data to cover all consumer climate impact is not the reason not to start doing it and using the figures that we actually have, and then very quickly improve them. The road from Paris. We took a large impression of this figure here. This is the so-called 2-degree target. And we started thinking, hey, what is this? It's negative. We need to go negative. And how do we do that? How do we formulate targets and work that take into consideration that we need negative emissions? Well, we did the only thing that we could. If this is what we need to do, let's formulate a target on that, and then find out afterwards, how can we do that? Well, let's find out it together. And we're quite sure that there will be a lot of people who has a lot of ideas, how can that be done? And you have already touched upon a little bit of negative, how you can attract it. And the target is to be fossil-free locally in Uppsala by 2030. And we think that Sweden would also be very good off to start discussing target deadlines after 2045, 50. Because if this is the final target, then you need to have that in perspective, not a target in between, because then you risk to stay in structures where you will not reach the final target, which is low emission, negative emission. And we call this climate positive because it's more fun to be positive than to be negative. And you see the figures here in numbers. A little bit about the challenges and possibilities for our targets here. First of all, oil is soon gone in the energy sector here in Uppsala. Just a few weeks ago, Vattenfall proclaimed that they will invest. There is one final decision when everything is in place, what I understand, to exchange from peat to biofuels and stop burning peat by 2020 to be in line with the targets of the city. So kind of good citizen decision. And then we also transfer the major remaining oil boilers that you have as a reserve and so on to bio and some other measures. There will be then the plastic remaining. But Vattenfall has their own goal is to be climate neutral by 2030, so there's some 10 years to find out what that can be. The other thing is of course the transport system. And we think that we need to look into how that will be done, what can be done. Because right now there's a lot of big things going on private cars, small light vehicles. But the state is doing some planning on heavy trucks and heavy vehicles on the E4, whatever. And the municipalities are planning for, we are used to and know how to plan for people transportation, trams or buses with a line. So we need to get together, the state and the cities, to plan together. Because I don't think that we can afford, as a country, to have 2, 3, 4 different kind of electrification system. And why not use each other? I read a report from the Agency for Energy, the National Energy Agency, and they had 4 different pictures of the future. And one of the details were there that the electrification of heavy trucks in the nation were to take the electricity from the side. And so I was, okay, that's very good, but what do you do when you come into the city? You cannot take the electricity from the side. You need to take it from above or in the ground somehow. So it's an example where the state often, without knowing about what is happening or even knowing about cities, plan something. And we're planning something else, and we have a total mismatch. Climate positive. We'll not dwell so much on it because I think Anders pointed out many things. It's a lot of, we have to find ways to use our biomass more. We have to make agricultural land to a sink rather than to source. We need to capture carbon and carbon dioxide and use it rather than store it. And there are research here, for example in pyrolysis, that is promising in this, for example. But we need also, of course, to take a larger responsibility in the finance sector, from the cradle to the grave, etc., and contribute to it. This is a campaign or a mobilization from the government in the Swedish society, where they wanted to have a lot of actors to write the name on, let's become fossil fuel free in Sweden. But they never said when. So I hope there will be a when, and we will find a report, and that it will be 2030. But I think that the main idea here is that why don't the government start using this 150 organizations, maybe 200 organizations, in the same way that the UN has used the Lima Paris Action Agenda to come forward with the solutions in a general sense on climate change. We do something like that here in Uppsala. We have like a small Kyoto Protocol, a small COP 21. And here we have, well, some of the people you can see here in the audience. We have universities, we have large private companies like Healthcare, Sigurdsson, IKEA. We have the public authorities, and we have the environmental movement here. Maybe we can see Länsförsäkringar also be part of this, to have the finance and bank sector represented, because the idea here is to have all sectors and all kind of businesses represented here, to do the same thing as in the Lima Paris Action Agenda. The idea was there actually by the model of COP to have everybody at the same place and talk to each other, give each other new insights. And we, in the same way, work with different themes. We have been adding themes: circular economy, plastic hands, sustainable urban development, as we have been working these 5 years. And we, as in the Paris Agreement, we also work with how much can you contribute with, and how much can you contribute with. Not like to share, distribute the shame or in a negative sense, but we try to push each other to come forward with better targets and put it together and show that we can reach lower. We have, as on the national level, done a roadmap, and I will tell you a little bit about the result and the conclusions that we have drawn. We used a modeling program from Stockholm Environment Institute, and we have had the help by Vattenfall, but especially SLU, to model the energy system, but also things like cows and agriculture and long-distance traveling, and describing the geographical emissions. And we've been working together with Uppsala Climate Protocol, the second protocol. And what we first tried to do was to see how far can we come, or how far will the state get us if we do what the state can partially tell us to do. Then there is a lot of soft steering measures that, but the really strong measures will, in the best case, be the same in 2050 as today, or a little bit lower. Especially if we can implement more of the kind of lower hanging fruits that have been discussed recently in national climate policy. And we can see that that is happening. So the red arrows, we can hold back emissions, but we're far from reaching the long-term target. Then the yellow arrow, we put together and asked all of the members in the climate protocol. There's 33 members, and we are like 1/3 of all energy use in Uppsala. What can we do together? Everything from Vattenfall, big things, to Riksbygg, to whatever. And we could see that, well, maybe we can halve our emissions. Still far from our target. So what will it take to go very low? We find out that we need to make a lot of energy efficiency. Of course, all kind of oil has to go. The Nordic electricity production has to become fossil fuel free. And we need to somehow get rid of the fossil plastic that we burn. Increase it very little. And then we also put in 30% biofuels in the airplanes. And we still couldn't get below 1 ton per capita. So then we had to calculate that, well, we will have very climate conscious citizens in Uppsala. So if we change our traveling habits for vacation and from an increase, we have in the trend, we calculated with some 60% increase, but we need to decrease the average millage by 50% instead. We have to start home vacation, or we have to, I don't know, go by horse to Thailand or something like that. But we can also see that this was very much the conventional way of doing things, and we could see that there are other unconventional, more transformational ways to do things, especially on the energy supply side, and Anders has talked about biorefineries, and we think there's a lot of push into that can make actually that we can go beyond or below zero. Our conclusions from this, the fact that is there time to do this energy efficiency work? Is it time? Is there enough time to change our behavior and so on? We conclude as Miljömålsberedningen do, and as the national roadmap report do, is that there is need of transformation in all areas. And they need to be started to be done now. So we need to do the system shifts that we can see already, start pushing them. We need to identify new areas of system shift. What are they? And how can we get things going? And in general, get a system where we are making room for system shifts, whatever kind of transformation it will be. We see there also, and I think a lot of conclusions in Anders' committee is heading for that, is that we need, it's a complex problem, and we need to take large measures and think in a big picture. And that is, we need to work, usually in Sweden we work in sectors: agriculture, transport, building, private service, public service, the housing. We need to work across the sectors. We need to see the processes in the society. We are not enough helping each other locally and nationally. And I'm keen on to see how the final report from Miljömålsberedningen will do in that regard. I already spoke about intermodal transport electrification, and we also see other things. We see that there is a lot of hype among battery cars. When we say electrification, everybody thinks it's battery cars. And we see a huge environmental problem with battery cars, even if there would be enough. We need to find other ways. Trolley buses or hydrogen, Japanese way, is maybe the way we need to go. So I'm not so much worried about the private vehicles. I'm more worried about how to get the whole transport system sustainable. We also saw, as Anders is in on, that in the end, when we're looking to the long perspective, environmental work and climate change work is more or less the same. We need to have renewable material in a loop, detoxed. And we concluded that climate neutrality is not enough. We need some kind of positive ambitions. And we need some kind of positive picture of the future. It's very much the political level, the environmental organizations. We need to look forward. Where are we going as a society? and that it's a good society. And then we can solve the climate change issue. It's not solved in itself, it's solved. That's also why we, as a city, very much welcome Anders Committee's conclusions on that we need to have a climate law which is very much will draw all stakeholders into the loop and work together. Well, I think we skipped that one. So a little bit to conclude and conclude the remark is that the way from Paris is actually more or less the way to Paris. We need to continue working together. On the local level, we have Uppsala Climate Protocol. It's one way to meet over the different sectors, to see each other. What can you do? What can I do? What can we do together in the local perspective? Make use of all the 200 organizations that have signed Fossil Fuel Free Sweden. Start working as a big movement and continue to mobilize positively from Paris to Marrakesh. And let's see each other at the different levels. Let's see that there is a local government, there is national level, and there is international level. And that there is a lot of companies and non-governmental organizations and research institutes and universities. And we can all move forward, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Björn. Excellent. Now, questions. So let's start talking about what's happening in Uppsala, in fact. Now, I'm biking all the time. And of course, there are very nice biking roads, but not all of them are very nice. So that might be a small criticism against how this is being done. Is it increased? How do you what should I say, do you increase the caretaking of these roads or paths? Or do you have more personnel or how you do it?
Uppsala is a city of bikes, and this has, over the last couple of years, been more recognized also in the planning department and planning of the city, that it is so, and that the bike is an essential and part of the transportation system. And the investment budget and also the maintenance budget has increased. And the goal for the city is that Uppsala will win the, every year there is a ranking between different cities on the best biking city, and the goal is to win that in 2018. And I think my colleagues are doing good work, and I think that when you see the flaws and the bad things, you take your smart camera and you take a picture and then you send it into the to our system. So you can be our eyes to improve our infrastructure on
I think Bengt and then Lars.
I have two suggestions. As all of us know, Uppsala is building a lot now and expanding. And I happen to live in one of these regions where lots of new houses will be established. So there's of course lots of debate on these things like that. And true enough, environmental issues come into the picture in a nice way. I think also the dialogue works rather well. But I would suggest that one takes specifically up more of dialogue on the environmental issues. I live in the road. We have lots of bostadsrättsföreningar, we have many people engaged in these issues. And it would be, I think, very good to challenge these different local communities with precisely the long-term environmental issues. I know way, it's a more constructive way than just criticizing the plans for building too tall buildings and all these things. That's one suggestion. The other suggestion is, if you really want to make this long-term goal for the community as a whole, including trafficking, including transportation to other countries even, why don't you write a rather sharp letter to Uppsala University asking them how could they cut this, all these travels, say by a factor of 2 or 3. I think they can within a rather small number of years. So I think we should pull in Uppsala University into this, also with some challenges.
The awareness, the internal awareness at the university might be the force of change. Both in the Uppsala Climate Protocol, both the Uppsala University and SLU is 2 of the 33 members, and their big challenge is when we calculate the emissions from long distance traveling, it is SLU and Uppsala University, so they are very much aware of that, and then they're a little bit, yes, that it's our figures there, yes. So we're creating a peer pressure in that sense. But the emissions from business travel is actually, in general speaking, both in Uppsala and on the national level, a little bit on the same level, and per capita is then lowering. It is the vacational trips that is exploding, but we have to do what we can everywhere. Yeah. So we went to visit SJ last week to see if we can cooperate better with them and connect them with SLU and Uppsala University. Yeah. Let me. I know that my colleagues at the planning department are trying to improve their way, the forms of dialogue, and I think that Uppsala has a big opportunity when we are growing to make the new things, not only the new things, climate smart, but also helping the areas around. We need to look outside otherwise we will never have a sustainable city if we only look in there. I also know that it's difficult because it goes very fast and it must go fast. There's a lot of pressure on this, so it's always the dilemma to have the time to have enough good environmental work and dialogue. Yeah.
Let me remind you that some universities write sustainability reports, and the best are from Göteborg University.
Yeah, well,
they point very much on this traveling. It's a key thing.
Being from Göteborg, I didn't want to point that out. But if you do it, I'm happy to underline that.
May I add, I think this business travel is important because it sets a standard. So if it's clear from your job that, and even from your prestigious job, that they are very anxious about this. Maybe you privately...
You might be right, but it's totally disconnected. You're a good person to do work, and then that's one thing, and you have a policy and everything, and then you do something else on vacation. But the traveling from the universities are in itself increasing, and they need to look to what they can do. Yes.
I remember Maria Wetterstrand, she worked as a sort of consultant at Telia. And she, of course, pointed out these business trips were very, very many. And said, you are now a communication company, you should be able to do something about that. And in fact, they took up her challenge. And what they built was a room where they have the screen on one of the short ends of the room, the wall, and a table that came out from that one. And in the other end, wherever it was, New York or something, they had exactly the same thing. So when they were sitting there, they're looking at the screen as a continuation of the table, and there others were sitting. And it worked beautiful. They reduced their travels. I mean, if you start looking at it, you can do a lot. Now it's Lars.
I'm curious to hear something about one concrete project here in Uppsala. For close to 10 years, I've been involved in trying to stop the idea of using the Ärna military airfield for civilian traffic purposes. And temporarily, at least, it seems we have managed to stop this, I would say, crazy, absurd idea in the kinds of perspectives we are dealing with this afternoon. But how does it, because they have withdrawn their application. But how does it enter into this Klimat protocol that you talked about?
Well, actually, I tried to invite the militaries to our work, or at least to one of our conferences, but they never replied, actually. My view on this is that we need to put the money we have to invest in the future that we see is needed. And I would say that if we have a large international airport 20 minutes from here, investing in an airport here would not be my first priority. And of course, where you put your money, you push things. You tell something about where the world is going. But in the figures, we take the figures is from how people travel, and that's disregarding from where. But of course, if there is a more capacity locally, there of course more focus on traveling. Yeah. But maybe Anders, well, I gave you some reflections on the combination of what we do and we think and so on, and the committee you are chairing. So. What is your view on the local work here?
But I just wondered, is it mentioned concretely in this Klimat protocol, the Ärna project? No. Okay.
Well, I mean, I think what you are trying to put in place is very, very good, excellent. And you are not the only municipality that is moving in this direction, so there are many good examples, and I think the most important thing will be to learn from each other and to inspire each other. And then I know that the national level must hand over some authority, must help promote through different kinds of incentives certain types of action. So we have a long list but basically I think you are on the right track, absolutely. And I think to engage major stakeholders, and I agree that universities are very large places and influence a lot of people. And the digital or virtual reality technologies are expanding as we speak, but they're still not really being used. So I think we could cut down a lot on costs, on emissions, and on time by traveling less. I'm absolutely positive about it. I'm quite often invited to go abroad talking about these things. And as often as I can, I say no, unless it's something very special. And I say, no, I'd like to be connected via video link. And that happens. And Svenska riksdagen, the Swedish parliament, has a very sophisticated studio. But I've concluded that I'm one of the few who uses it. And yet I'm not a member. I was a member in the 1970s. So it's still not, I think young people understand this and see this, but we, the older generations, we simply don't get it. So I think there you have to put a lot of pressure.
Well, I think one contribution from universities is of course, their own administration, their own climate footprint. But one major thing is, of course, to make use of the knowledge. And I know that's one of the reasons why you are here, to meet university people, to see how that we need to work more focused on our research and education to help in and move forward.
But you know, a larger issue is of course that our whole education system is very silo-based. So it's very vertical organized, and I have, almost as a hobby horse, to criticize my own profession. I was trained as an economist because I think they have, at least in the past, had such a narrow perspective. And nature, when you read textbooks for education in economics, nature is looked upon as a constant, more or less. And whatever happens of interest is between producers and consumers. But the plant is there in the background and supposed to deliver all kinds of things. So I think we need a revolution in terms of how curricula are developed and try to foster more cross-disciplinarity. And I have come to conclude that universities today more or less are so independent. So if the government would say something like this, they would just look at them and say, no, don't intermingle with us. And I think that's very scary. It's very scary. So I don't think that the academic community as such in the near future is going to help us.
No,
Individuals are. Individuals are.
Thank you. Per is next.
I was just wondering about a small detail. You mentioned carbon capture and reusage.
And use, yeah.
Yeah. Would that be in cooperation with Vattenfall?
Well,
Or how would you capture the carbon? Where would you capture the carbon here in Uppsala?
I think that
You mean where would you store it?
No,
it can be.
first capture.
Well, we don't know. I think that we're starting to think about this, and that these are techniques that will need to be in place when some of the major burning blocks in Vattenfall will have served their time. So there will be time both for Vattenfall to think of new technologies and a different business in the future, and also other, of course, companies from maybe other stripes of society, which have different entrance point to their business, more biomaterial or biofuels or more, etc., etc. So let's see. But we start to need to develop and start thinking our system in this way, that we not only burn biomass directly, but we do something with it. And in the end of it, there will be energy produced that can be used to heat our houses. So the net that Vattenfall has is extremely important to safeguard for what comes in the future of integrated energy and material systems.
But that is the only concentrated point of emissions here in Uppsala, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one of the larger emissions in Sweden. Okay, Per-Arne.
Okay. Do you use in public transport in Uppsala hydrogen?
No?
No. I traveled 1 week ago in Hamburg with a public bus, but it made a stop and filled up with hydrogen, and then the fuel cells made electricity, and they use it. And the interesting is that when they filled it up, it was very big Vattenfall.
Yeah, it is the Vattenfall
Yes.
power station.
Why not in Uppsala?
Oh, we'll see.
Why not in Uppsala?
Someone has to
The
pay.
cars can go there.
I think in Sweden
Here,
there
it's-
are
it's
three
not-
hydrogen places where you can load hydrogen. It's Arlanda, it's Malmö, and it
And
is...
it's planned for in Germany until 2017.
Yeah.
There will be a net of possibilities to fill up with hydrogen.
And you know the
Because
economy...
you have taxis going by hydrogen and some private cars. I tried to make a photo in Hamburg from a car filling it up. Well, there was no car. I waited half an hour, but it doesn't seem to be very many cars. But this is a possibility, because
Yes.
this is really going to be a structural revolution with hydrogen technology.
As I said, I think that hydrogen, as well as other electrical system than the battery cars,
Yes, you
we
can
need
get-
to be developed, and we closely watching the development. And right now we're not in the forefront of this in particular.
För fasen, alla i Sverige snackar hela tiden om vi ska gå före. 1996 var Sverige före nästan överallt. Och University var med.
But I think it's
fram.
extremely interesting technology, and
But you have to take into account that you need an infrastructure development that is quite expensive.
I was
So-
talking about infrastructure now.
Yeah, but
2017.
yeah, okay, but
And it took 3 minutes to fill it up. And you can drive with a car
we're not saying
400 to 600 kilometers.
yeah. But nobody, I think, nobody has a definite answer what is going to be the future when it comes to transportation. I was in Oslo the other week, and there is a group of venture capitalists who are investing massively in hydrogen for transportation, in particular for trucks, and maybe also for buses. So I think the attitude that we have taken in the Miljövårdsberedningen is to not try to make a guess, rather say we have to keep the options open. And I agree with you that, you know, billions of lithium batteries is not a future that I would like to have. I met with an innovator the other day who has a system designed where instead of charging your battery, and it will take you an hour or two or even more, you would change battery at the gas station, and that would take 3 minutes. And if that kind of a system would develop, the ownership of the batteries would be with somebody else, not me driving the car, and that to me looks much more interesting from a sort of toxicity point of view. So I think we are in the early stages, and I don't think anyone can say what is the best.
But
This is
also what you said,
disruption. You have the word
Yeah,
disruption. I'm sure in 3 years we should come together.
Yeah.
You'll say, I'm sorry, you're right.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. But I couldn't say that. Okay, let's go 100% for hydrogen in Sweden. I couldn't say that.
No, but
I think this is the debate in the debate. Now we should let Isak have the word. He has asked for it for a while. Okay. Now
Thank
it's
you,
Isak.
and thank you, Anders and Björn, for really interesting presentations. And I really appreciated the way you ended, Björn, specifically with the need for positive visions and to really think deeply about what the climate change challenge really entails. And on that note, I guess, I think I agree with you, Anders, that the climate change challenge is, of course, partly technical and biophysical in nature, and without underplaying the importance of these perspectives, and also understanding the limited time frame that you've had to work with in in this work, I find that the list of prioritized areas for Sweden a bit worrisome. And I think it has a slight tendency, I guess, also in your presentation to, and we'll see what the report says in that as well, in terms of the role of technology and sort of the analysis of technology in relation to the larger societal and environmental challenges of our times. And I guess I have two provocative comments or questions, I guess, in relationship to this. The first one being on decoupling, and also asking for a clarification that I think a lot of research shows that relative decoupling is very possible, so decoupling economic growth from continued resource extraction. But on the global scale, or on sort of absolute decoupling, is proven to be impossible, if not very, very difficult. So I guess that's a big question if you're framing the goals for Sweden's environmental strategies to respond to climate change and other challenges on a belief on absolute decoupling. I think that there's a risk potentially there. I think the other
decoupling money and carbon, or what?
I guess there's a distinction that you can make between both carbon emissions and economic growth, but also on continued resource extraction and what that entails, and economic growth. I think the second common question, and I guess this is a bit strange being an engineer to say this, but I've come to see climate change as truly a cultural, social, and maybe even existential crisis, but also perhaps an opportunity at its roots. So I guess my question or comment would be that isn't this a real chance to really reinvent our presence here on Earth, and not in least in relationship to the more than human world as well. And I guess, as Naomi Klein says, what if this is the best chance we're ever going to get to build a better world? So here, this comes back to the positive visions, and I think we really need more than behavioral scientist help in that. So I guess the question or comment would be that aren't there a lot of other sort of scientific domains and also a lot of other research, but also actors outside of academia that could help us with this?
Well, those were two very good questions. On the first one, I agree with you that absolute decoupling in the world at large in the near future is probably not possible. However, I think we have to do everything possible to slow down the throughput of energy materials to buy time. And if I gave the impression that I think this is the solution, it's not the case. But I'm amazed how little material efficiency has been at all in the forefront so far. And you know, the interesting thing is that the whole bloody economy is moving forward by selling more stuff all the time. And you build obsolescence into the products, and you are, as producer, you are quite happy if they fail rather soon, rather than later. Not in every area, but in many areas. And it's an absurd situation. The building and construction sector, 40% of the material throughput. Look at what's happening whenever something is renovated. It's just thrown away. Either it's dumped somewhere or it's burnt. It's a colossal waste. McKinsey and Ellen MacArthur Foundation did a study last year called Growth Within, where they leave aside the environmental and climate aspects. They saw that less than 10% of the value of things that are being thrown away is being captured in any meaningful way. So there is a lot of money just thrown out of the window. So I think we have to stop that and start moving in another direction. Secondly, yes, I agree with you that it is in a way an existential crisis. But I think the way we fish our oceans, the way we destroy rainforests, etc., is more or less a symptom of the same kind, like carbon emissions. In a way, I think that the way we manage ecosystems is even worse, because that has been visible. Carbon emissions we didn't understand until 25, 30 years ago. So I think your plea for a new narrative and all that, yeah, I agree with you. I couldn't make my committee move give 100% priority to that. It was impossible. And I won't mention any names, but it was impossible. But at least we are now looking into areas of importance where we believe, yes, we can move towards zero. And I think that's very important. But I agree with you. It's only half of the glass. But I would like to maintain that to present the glass as half full rather than half empty is important. And that's what we're trying to do. Because nobody listens if you say it's half empty. If it's just gloom and doom.
I think it's all in our heads, of course. It's all in our heads. It's a social construction. Everything here is a social construction. If there were a war and nobody came, there were the war. Right. But I think that it was very interesting, Anders, that you had roundtables on the state versus market, because that's something that we see, and then you question who is coming in to do these new things. And I think that we need to discuss that more, because we can sit with a situation with a electrification of the transport system, market-driven, and sit with 12 different kind of solutions. And that is not economically. And also, look into what we have been doing in the history. District heating, that was a municipal initiative until we in the 90s privatized it, more or less, a lot of it. I think we need to look into more in this transformation. What is the role of the city and the state, and in combination, what can we do, and how can we thrust forward?
Thank you, Björn. There are 3 more questions. Let's have these questions, and then you can respond to them a little, because it's really moving on. Björn and then John Fagus, and then the third person is behind you. I'm sorry. At the wine.
It's Wendelin, yeah. Okay.
Wendelin,
it's a little reflection
but
about hydrogen.
Just a second, it's not your yet,
okay.
But soon.
I have a proposal following what you said, Anders. Previously you also told about your work that you had not been able to undertake any behavioral studies. I like very much when you took up the word positive climate, because that is part of behavior. We have to look on everything going forward towards something positive to get out of the downward trend in our minds. You mentioned a moment ago also that the state can tell the universities what to do. However, why not now, when universities are part of cities, why not form an alliance of all the cities being on the front line, taking up behavioral studies, etc., in order to change university cities as the best cities in Sweden and showing the way forward? That was my proposal. We work together in that sense, and because you said that again, that the government can't help, but you are part of the city, and you can be part of forming something new.
Thank you very much. Now, Jan Focus.
Now we are back on a more local level, and that fits with my question. You talk about electrical driven transportation, and there has been a debate in Uppsala whether we should have trams or not. And I have never understood why we do not discuss electrical driven buses, trådbuss in Swedish. What's the disadvantage? I can only see advantages compared to the stiff, rigid rail-bound system. With an electrical driven bus, you can go in to the left and to the right and so on. And why isn't it on the agenda?
Thank you. That's your question. Now
in other cities.
Very good. Wendelin,
Yes, it's only a reflection about hydrogen. I was a member of a hydrogen club from Sundsvall, and it was Olle Tengström in the late 80s, what it was. He had his household and car driven by hydrogen, but he didn't succeed. So Sweden was very known in Germany about this man. We forget such things. In Sundsvall.
What's his name?
Olle Tengström. He's dead now. And the club finished about in the early 90s.
There are some forerunners, absolutely.
Okay.
So thank you. That's the end of the questions we can afford to have. And now, please, Björn and Anders, if you want to comment on this thing, you're welcome.
Shortly, because everybody wants to go somewhere else now. What you're pointing at is exactly what I'm trying to point out. That when we're planning for public transportation of people, and thinking how to electrify that one, we need to think also about distribution, transportation, and so on. Trådbuss, what's that end in English? Trolley? Huh?
Trolley buses.
Trolley buses. There should be trolley buses and heavy vehicles. So if there is trams built in Uppsala, I presume, I take it for granted, that also buses and lorries will make use of the same infrastructure.
Well, Göran Bäckstrand's proposal to foster or promote much closer cooperation between universities and the cities where they are located, I think that's an exciting idea, and it could really bring some real stuff. And I would assume, I'm closer to Linköping because I teach there, but I would assume that some of the cities have quite close cooperation, but it could probably be improved. When it comes to your question about electrification of buses, etc., there is of course a discussion to electrify some of the long-haul routes for heavy trucks, and whether you do it as a connection in the pavement or you do it in the air, I think it depends a little bit. Harry Frank, the former research director at ABB, he's traveling around the world championing the lines in the air, the networks in the air. And I don't know. I think it's a cost issue, but something must happen like that. I think so.
And I say that in Sweden we like to think a lot about technical neutrality policy making, and sometimes we need to do the other side, the opposite, to actually drive something.
But that's where public procurement comes in.
Proactive. It's not only that; it can be, but it's also innovation and policy measures. Yeah.
Perhaps I should finalize by saying there are quite many examples of good cooperation between cities and universities in those cities, all over the Baltic Sea region where I am more aware of it, and also other countries, like England, for example. So that's just one case. Linköping is another. Malmö, very strong cooperation. Malmö has profiled the Malmö University on city development. Malmö, of course. Stockholm, I don't know exactly how much it is, but Göteborg for sure, absolutely, and so on. So it is happening. I don't know of a network of extension ideas or something. Perhaps that's the next step. So, thank you very much. Our two panelists or lecturers.